Eagle Nation basketball season has arrived, and it's time to preview the 2019 men's and women's basketball campaigns for your Georgia Southern Eagles. Alongside Colin Lacy, I'm the voice of the Eagles, Danny Reed. We begin with Mark Byington's men's squad off back-to-back 21-win campaigns. 3 times in the last 5 seasons, they've won 20 or better. Big storyline, though, how do you move on from the graduation of Tukey Brown and Monte Glenn?
Yeah, everybody sees what Tukey Brown did over his career at Georgia Southern, a first-team 4-time in the Sun Belt Conference. But I think what people don't realize is how much of an impact Monte Glenn may have had on this team the last couple of years, being kind of that quarterback in the middle of the lane, especially on the defensive side for Coach Byington.
There's still a lot of guys that return for Mark Byington's squad. Isaiah Crawley, 11 points a game, almost 6 rebounds per game last year. Look for him to be an all-conference guy in 2019. Had 5 double-doubles in his first season after transferring into the program. Quan Jackson was a third-team All-League pick last year. 14 points a game, 4.5 rebounds, also 2 steals a game. He's a guy that's about 6'4", but he talks all the time about that 6'9" wingspan.
He talks about being long all the time, especially on the defensive side of the ball. And a lot of what he was able to do steals-wise, one of the tops in the country in that category. And what you saw is just the active hands that Coach Byington has talked about ever since he got to Statesboro. And Quan being able to move those long hands, get tips, and it usually led to 2 points.
One of the question marks that needs to be addressed, who officially takes over for Tukey Brown? Colin, I don't think it's necessarily one person, but what will David Lee Jones Jr. bring and what will Calvin Wishart bring now that they have to take the mantle?
Yeah, now that you've seen Tukey Brown go from playing 37 minutes a game until not being here, I think it's going to take a couple of guys that really step in and fill that void, especially for this first year as you go throughout non-conference play. That's not to say that one of those couldn't take the bull by the horns, and by the time we get to January into conference play, that's when you really see somebody kind of excel.
You remember it was Calvin that started all of conference play last year as a freshman. David Lee Jones Jr. shot nearly 40% from three-point territory, really improved that part of his game. Look for them to have a big impact on what Georgia Southern does on both sides of the floor. And then in the paint, with Monte Glenn gone, we already talked about Isaiah Crawley a little bit, but somebody that really came onto the forefront during conference play last year was Simeon Carter.
And I think between Simeon Carter and Isaiah Crawley, those two could have a monster year this year and have both of them on the floor at times at the same time. Crawley has the ability to move out to that 4, but also play the 5, and Sim is going to be the lockdown at that 5, and I don't know that there's anybody else in the conference, in the country, that brings more energy than Simeon Carter does to the floor.
Played 18 minutes a game last year, 8 points, 4 rebounds a game, but was also top 5 in the conference with nearly a block and a half per. Moving on to the women's side, it's a state of change here in Statesboro. You bring in Anita Howard for year 1. You always have to wonder how that's going to mix. Number 1, you've got 2 home scrimmages to figure out what it's going to look like in the early going. Number 2, she's got a wealth of seniors for this season.
You start off those scrimmages on October 30th against Coker, and then Coastal Georgia comes to Hanner Fieldhouse on November the 5th. And I think it's really going to be the first time that Georgia Southern gets to see the up-tempo style of basketball that Coach Howard is bringing, and somebody that we talked about with Simeon Carter bringing energy to the floor. I don't know that there's a coach that's going to bring more energy in the Sun Belt Conference than Coach Howard has already to Statesboro.
Final season for Nicole Franks, Haley Dias-Allen, Amira Atwater, but also think about how much Tatum Barber made that move last year to become one of the best players on the team.
Yeah, and you see Tatum Barber, just kind of that energy on the floor, the never-give-up mentality that Georgia Southern in all sports has been built on. Tatum really resembles that. But I think you also have to think of this is Alexis Brown's final year. We talked about Tukey already earlier on in this preview, but Alexis Brown is somebody that really took the bull by the horns last season, was the leading scorer for Georgia Southern, and was really the quarterback of this team as you went down the backstretch.
Familiar faces abound for a first-year coaching staff, but some new blood's going to be very important as well. Nikki McDonald looks like a player.
She absolutely is. She's going to be a big part of the success for Georgia Southern women's basketball this season. The transfer in from La Tech, she was a Lady Techster down in Ruston last year, coming in and really provides not only the big body that Georgia Southern hasn't necessarily had the last couple of years, but also the scoring presence from wherever on the floor.
It soon begins. First for the Georgia Southern women at Furman on November the 10th up in Greenville, South Carolina. Home opener at Hanner Fieldhouse November the 17th against Kennesaw State. For the Georgia Southern men, November the 5th, it's a trip to the Plains to take on Auburn. Top 25 team for 2019. Remember, they went to the Final Four last year and were within a second from going to their first ever national championship game. Home opener comes up on Friday, November the 8th, as Georgia Southern welcomes in Reinhardt. Hope you make it out to Hanner Fieldhouse this year. Visit gseagles.com/tickets for more information or call 1-800-GSU-WINS. For Colin Lacy, this is Danny Reed. We'll see you this season at Hanner Fieldhouse and on gseagles.com.